to Sightings. I'm Tim White. Virtually unknown by all but the most dedicated ufologists, a confirmed sighting in Mansfield, Ohio may be the most significant UFO encounter to date. Why isn't Mansfield, Ohio in the pantheon of UFO hotspots? Because the key witnesses wouldn't, or were instructed not to, talk publicly. Until now.
It was October 1973. A Cleveland, Ohio police detective asked his partner to meet him in an interrogation room. The cop wanted to make a report about the strangest thing that had ever happened to him, and he wanted it on tape.
Today is October the 19th, 1973, and the time is approximately 2 p.m. I have with me in my office at the present time Detective John Healy. Healy's going to describe in his own way of an incident that had occurred last night.
Okay, we left Port Columbus Airport at about 10:30 last night. And about 11 o'clock, which is halfway...
The tape you are listening to is an important historical document. It is a permanent record of a UFO encounter that occurred on the night of October 18th, 1973, as witnessed by Detective John Healy.
It had a steady red light on its nose. It was cigar-shaped, and it had a green light shining down out of the aft end.
When Detective Healy wasn't on the beat, he was an Army Reserve medic. On the night in question, Healy and 3 other reservists were returning to Cleveland via helicopter from their annual Army physical. Over the town of Mansfield, Ohio, all 4 men made contact with a UFO. Detective Healy now speaks publicly about the incident for the first time in 20 years.
We were almost involved in a mid-air collision with an object that was coming out of the east, heading west toward us. I noticed a red light on our port side going south. It was a big red light, but I didn't think anything of it. I thought it would be the port wing of another aircraft. We saw it kept coming at us, and it was a clear night, unlimited visibility. It didn't have any wings. It didn't have any windows, as you would see on a conventional aircraft.
Healy was not the only witness. All 4 crew members saw the UFO, and the 2 pilots filed official military reports detailing their versions of the near-deadly UFO encounter. But Healy is the only one who, 2 decades later, is willing to speak out. He described for Sightings what all 4 crew members attested to when they signed this affidavit.
This was an object that moved at a very fast rate of speed. It saw us probably before we saw it. It just tracked us because we had all our navigation lights on and running and blinking. And then it started back toward us again. Maybe it had never seen a helicopter at night.
The UFO appeared to be threatening the helicopter, maneuvering toward it on a collision course.
The pilot was flying in the right seat. He had to take the controls, and he put the helicopter into a dive.
After narrowly avoiding a mid-air crash, the pilot took evasive action, diving at a rate of 2,000 feet per minute. At 1,700 feet, the helicopter was suddenly paralyzed, even though the controls were still in a dive configuration. The UFO cast an ominous greenish light over the helicopter.
This was just a humongous green light just shining down on us in a very definite cone shape. You could look at the light and you could actually see the beam of the light.
The pilot tried to dive, but instead started to rise. It seemed that the UFO was pulling the helicopter toward it, overriding the aircraft's controls.
In regards to our aircraft climbing, while it was in a dive configuration, I didn't feel us being pulled up as in an elevator or a roller coaster. You don't feel the G-force of a dive or a climb. I didn't feel that. It scanned us for that instant that it hesitated over us. It scanned us. Then it took off.
After the object went off to the west, the helicopter pilot noted that although he had been in a descent and his controls were in the configuration for a descent, the helicopter had actually risen to 3,800 feet.
Jenny Zeidman was part of a research team from CUFOS, the Center for UFO Studies, that investigated the Mansfield encounter for more than 3 years. The interviews, military reports, and diagrams compiled by CUFOS make Mansfield one of the most well-documented UFO encounters ever.
My analysis of this case showed that the object was under continual observation for 5 minutes, perhaps even more.
Despite the impeccable credentials of the 4 military men, the Center for UFO Studies searched for ground eyewitnesses that could corroborate the sighting, and they found them. The DeLong family was driving on the outskirts of Mansfield when they saw a helicopter hovering in the wake of a UFO.
The kids kept hollering, they wanted to stop, they wanted to stop.
She finally stopped the car and I jumped out. I remember the whole top of the sky was lit up a dull fluorescent green.
I looked out and the helicopter was just sitting there in midair with this object over it. And to be honest, it scared me. I was scared at that time. But it didn't sink in that it was still really something, a UFO.
The DeLongs were interviewed 3 years after the fact by Warren Nicholson, director of the Civil Commission on Aerial Phenomena. He grilled the family about what they had seen.
I was a little bit doubtful at first that maybe they had just read the story in the newspaper, but they knew things that hadn't been in the article. From the multiple interviews we had with them, you could tell that they were scared.
This brought together 2 groups of witnesses. It established the exact location of the event. We were able to compute the flight path of the helicopter.
Legendary UFO researcher Dr. J. Allen Hynek compiled sketches of the event drawn by the flight crew and conducted in-depth interviews about every aspect of the encounter. At the same time, the military was conducting their own investigation. They ruled the incident a near miss with an unidentified craft. Their findings were inconclusive in large part because the radio transmissions between the helicopter and the tower had mysteriously disappeared. Was the tape erased to cover up the encounter? Or could the UFO have intentionally obliterated the transmission? Coincidentally, many other onboard instruments continued to malfunction weeks, even years after the incident.
The aircraft number was 15444. That was the aircraft we were in that night. She was never any good after that. She was the hangar queen after that. They could, the radios would never work right, navigation instruments, nothing.
The skeptics immediately came up with the idea that this was a meteor. Well, there's no way this could have been a meteor. It lasted for 5 minutes. No meteor takes 5 minutes to cross the sky from horizon to horizon. As far as I'm concerned, the case will not be concluded until we have identified this object.
But after 21 years, the trail is growing cold. The Mansfield UFO will never be investigated by our military the way Detective Healy once took for granted that it would be.
It's quite something. Anything further comes along, I'd just be interested in knowing.
Oh, no, well, we've got a reserve meeting the 3rd of November, and if nothing else, I'll find out how far the report's gone from there.
Thanks ever so much.